I've played 30 games of Hound Hunter, and at this point, there is no question in my mind, this deck is absolutely tier S in the current meta. The deck has a strong potential for early game, it has a strong potential for late game, then of course it also packs a lot of healing with the Hollow Hound, a card that Hunter has come to know and love since its introduction into Standard. This list is likely going to look really familiar to you here. There haven't been a whole lot of changes, but there are a few key cards that I want to go over just because of how important they are to the deck. Awakening Tremors, a new card, this just being able to give us the ability to generate some extra 1-drops. The 4/1s themselves, if they stick, can deal an absolute ton of damage, and there have been certain cases where my hand has been a little bit thin, and being able to generate 3 extra cards is really, really good. Also, the Titan Forge Traps, this card has been surprisingly good as well. You definitely have time to forge it. You don't necessarily need that 2 damage from your hero power. You can forge this card, you'll get to select 2 traps, and there's a wide variety of Hunter traps to be able to select from right now. I believe there are 9 traps in Standard, and so if you need something for like anti-aggro, or if you need a freezing trap because of one really, really big opponent's minion, you have the ability to be able to discover exactly what you need in that specific scenario. You're going to notice here also Blademaster Okani in the deck. This is just for disruption for those decks that do really, really powerful things, specifically thinking about OTK Shaman. After they play Flash of Lightning, you can get down the Blademaster Okani, play it to block a spell, and really disrupt what your opponent is able to do as far as their combo there. And then you're also going to see a copy of Speaker Stomper here. I feel like you could actually just cut this. I have not faced very many Shaman with this deck, but again, it's there just for the disruption for the spell-heavy decks. Thinking specifically about Shaman and Druid coming off the top of my head. Again, Shaman, you see that Flash of Lightning, you play the Speaker Stomper, and you're going to be able to disrupt your opponent's combo, and then you kind of force them to have to find the second Flash of Lightning. Same note in the Druid matchup as well, just being able to delay your opponent from doing those really, really powerful things. I would also offer one quick note here about Faithful Companions. I think the flashy play that everyone expects is to be able to play this on turn 10 or later, be able to draw 2 King Crushes, and be able to finish off your opponent. Again, that is the flashy play, but it's not always the correct play. Sometimes we're playing this on turn 7, turn 8, just to be able to get out a Hollow Hound, or even just a Mukla, to be able to get a nice minion on the board, either for healing or just a big board presence. You're not always going to be saving that for turn 10. We want to stay aware of where we're at in the game, and be able to make those plays accordingly to give ourselves the best possible chance to win. Also, a quick note about Aggramar. I feel like a lot of people probably just jam Aggramar and very quickly pick the +2 attack for the weapon. And while that can be good if you're trying to set up lethal, or if there's a priority minion on the board that you need to remove, I find myself most oftentimes actually just taking the card draw off of this particular minion. Being able to get those extra cards in hand go a long way in every single matchup, and especially if you're low on cards in hand, or if your hand just doesn't have any good options, it can actually just be better to take the card draw. In my experience, Aggramar is only going to be on the board for 1 turn, and that may mean you're only going to be able to pick 1 ability. Also keep in mind here that in certain matchups or in certain situations, it may just be better to be able to take the 3/3 taunt than the other options as well. Specifically, I think about Odin Warrior, being able to prevent your opponent from punching you in the face is really good. Or if you're actually just really low on health, maybe that 3/3 taunt might be just enough to buy you the time that you need to either find lethal or maybe get to a Hollow Hound. When you play Aggramar, definitely take a few moments to think about what's going to be the best effect to be able to give your weapon for the situation that you're currently in. As for the matchup specifically, when it comes to Death Knight, Plague Death Knight, you pretty much just win the game. Your opponent is never going to be able to threaten your life total. The Plague Death Knight plan is just a little bit too slow, and so we're just going to look to develop the board throughout the game. We're going to find healing from Hollow Hounds when we need it, and then we're just going to be able to close them out at some point without ever really feeling like you're going to lose that matchup. Against Blood Death Knight, we're playing mostly more of a late game centric plan. That could be a matchup where the Faithful Companion is going to draw 2 King Crushes out of your deck for a finisher. We definitely want to play as many King Crushes as possible. When I'm playing Selective Breeders against Blood Death Knight, oftentimes I'm actually looking to discover the King Crush, because we're dealing A, damage to our opponent, and then B, we want as many King Crushes as possible in the Strangle Thornheart. Typically, the matchup feels like it's definitely going to be Hunter favored. Getting into Demon Hunter, I've seen both Relic Demon Hunter as well as Outcast Demon Hunter. Against Outcast, you're really just looking to remove their board as effectively as possible. You know that they're going to have to kill you from board, and you want to prioritize removing their rush minions first, because having rush minions on the board that can attack when the Halveria comes down is going to be how they get their big damage to be able to finish off the game. And then also keeping in mind that a well-timed Hollow Hound to be able to top off is going to be really, really good in that matchup as well. Typically, you can prevent yourself from getting too low, and you just go on to win that matchup. Against Relic Demon Hunter, you do have to be a little bit careful of their board clears. You know that they're going to be coming down with the Silvermoon Arcanist as well as the Unleash Fel. And many of those decks are now also running the Enchanter that doubles damage done to enemy minions. So if they have an Enchanter, a Silvermoon Arcanist, and an Unleash Fel, it's going to be 6 damage to your entire board and a full health. So you're going to want to approach that game in a way that you are not overextending on the board, but you still want to be able to pressure your opponent's health total, and then start to look to close out the game in the mid to late game from there before they get the really, really big boards off of the Relic of Phantasms. Against Drum Druid, I actually only faced it one time, and I would have to say that I feel like this deck is actually unfavored, maybe the only unfavored matchup out there, but what I found is that Drum Druid will very, very consistently around turn 5, 6, or 7 create that really big board of taunts. That means you can no longer hit your opponent in the face with weapons and minions, and so they do it on such a consistent basis that unless you get a very, very aggressive start that your opponent cannot answer, they're going to get up that wall of taunts just in time, and you're actually going to lose on the swing back that next turn when they're able to send all those minions into your face. Best advice for this matchup is to just focus on the early game, try to get out as many minions as possible. Definitely the Awakening Tremors is going to be a friend in this matchup, being able to get those 4/1s out as many as early and often as possible could potentially be a way that you're going to be able to overwhelm your opponent with just too much damage to deal with. Hunter, by far the most popular matchup that I face, and it's actually split between 2 different decks. There's the Mirror Match, and then there is also the Secret/Arcane Hunter. And what I would say here is the first thing that you're going to notice, the most important thing in the Hunter matchup is actually who goes first. If you're going first, I would say you are significantly favored, whether it's against Arcane Hunter or if it's against the big Hound Hunter that we're playing here as well. Going first, definitely a boon, simply because this is a very initiative-based deck. You want to be going first. Otherwise, going second, you just feel like you're always behind, you're always fighting to catch up, and you can even the board, but you're never actually able to overtake your opponent on the board, and it just kind of leads to some losses here. So things that you're going to want to keep in mind against Arcane Hunter, they do have the potential for some big burst with their arcane spells after they've been buffed with spell power. And so if you can pressure your opponent early and force them to use the ricochet shots and potentially arcane shots for removal, it's going to go a long way to preventing how much damage they're going to be able to do in a single turn later on in the game. Also keeping in mind that Hollow Hounds are going to offer a lot of healing in the matchup. You're going to want to stay as healthy as possible and really just fighting for the board absolutely as hard as you can, and being very, very conservative with your life total in that matchup. Those Arcane Hunters can put out a lot of damage in a single turn as the game moves on and as they've played those spell power buff cards. Against Hound Hunter, I actually like keeping Lorthamar in the matchup. Likely you're going to be drawing cards to be able to play in the early game. The early game is going to be a stalemate as you're playing, but if you're able to get down to Lorthamar on turn 7 or even turn 6 with the coin, buffing the minions that are in your deck, you're going to put yourself in a significantly better position than what your opponent is going to be able to do in most cases. The big Hollow Hounds are going to allow you to be able to have lots and lots of healing once they've had their stats doubled, and they're going to offer you a significant amount of board clear. Other call out in the matchup, Hydrolodon may actually also be worth keeping too. I've had games where it felt like the first person to Hydrolodon actually won the game because Hydrolodon is so hard to deal with after it's already on the board, and especially when there's going to be 4 3/1s on the board as well. One special note here, one of the games I actually lost, make sure you keep in mind that the Hope of Quel'th the Lost has been nerfed. I actually lost a Hunter Mirror specifically because I thought this weapon still had 4 attack. It only has 3 attack now. Don't pull an Uncorrupt. Make sure you know what your cards do. I actually faced 0 mages in 30 games. Rainbow Mage actually fallen out of popularity in the last couple of days, at least in the games that I've been playing. I would offer that you need to keep in mind that the Mage is going to have solid alibis. They are going to have board clears with the Inquisitive Creation, so you're going to want to be careful about how much you actually commit to the board if you think it's reasonable that they're going to have an Inquisitive Creation and on how much damage it's going to be able to do. You may need to hold a little bit back. You can't throw away your entire hand into one individual board clear. When you do have healing that could be important with the Hollow Hound, you're going to want to stay as healthy as possible because of the Sif combo that could come down in the later game. And so really it's just going to be an all-out fight for the board and trying to squirrel away any advantage that you possibly can of a bigger minion that's not going to be able to be removed by your opponent to be able to get that big damage into your opponent's face. I would say the matchup likely 50-50. It'd be a small edge to the Hunter, though. Absolutely zero Paladins on the ladder. I'm just not seeing the class. Any Paladin that you do see is likely going to be Mech Paladin, or it could be some form of Crusader or a Paladin. It could be dudes. It could be pure Paladin. Again, it's just going to be a fight for the board. The Hollow Hounds are going to be really good to serve as a board clear and a way to be able to heal. And Star Power, again, it's just going to be a really solid board clear for you here. So fight for the board as hard as you can. Don't allow your opponent to have a big board, because once that Crusader aura comes down, their minions are going to be doing a lot of damage and getting bigger every single time they get to attack. Overall, though, I would say that this is likely going to be Hunter favored. You should be able to keep up with, if not out-tempo your opponent in that matchup. I did see a few priests out here. There are a couple of control priests running around on the ladder. I would say here that likely we are favored into this because we have the potential for such a strong late game, but sometimes the priest actually just has everything. They hit absolutely every removal they need exactly on time. They hit Love Everlasting, and then you just feel like you're spending the entire game not even really playing Hearthstone, but just watching your opponent remove minions. So games like that can definitely be a little bit frustrating. Against Rogue, I went a surprising 3-0. There are some secret rogues out there. I feel like they just absolutely dominate the secret rogue matchup. We're just doing more powerful things on every individual turn. We're going to win the tempo battle. We continue to develop a bigger and bigger board, and we just send more damage into our opponent's face. Secret rogue likely very unfavored in the matchup. And of course, the other rogue that you're going to see is Mech Rogue. Occasionally, the Mech Rogues can get those really, really big mechs early in the game. A Titan Forge Traps is going to be your good friend. In that situation, potentially you can discover a Freezing Trap if your opponent is not wise enough to be able to spread out their board a little bit and have at least 2 big minions. And a well-timed Freezing Trap can actually just win you the game. Outside of that, in the Mech Rogue matchup, you really just want to be playing early game minions as much as possible to be able to fight for the board. Make sure you're trading for their mechs. You know they're going to have the ability to be able to give their mechs Divine Shield and Stealth, and you want to prevent them from getting just this huge mech that you can't remove. Against Shaman, I managed to come out with 2 wins in 3 games. Not very many Shaman on the board, but as you know, Nature Shaman, an OTK deck that some people are really struggling against. The good news about OTK Shaman is they absolutely telegraph the turn that they're going to go in, and so we do have some counterplay in the deck. You can get down the Blade Master Okani or potentially the Speaker Stomper. That's going to allow you the ability to disrupt your opponent's kill turn, and then they're actually going to have to wait and attempt to find another flash of lightning before they can try it again. We just want to try to build pressure in the early game, keeping in mind that they can clear the board. They may need to use a Crash of Thunder, or the deck is likely also going to be running Lightning Storm, but being able to pressure your opponent's health total early to potentially be able to set up lethal from a Faithful Companions pulling out a King Crush, definitely going to be a good way to approach that matchup. We know that they don't have access to very much healing, and being able to disrupt their combo turn can oftentimes just buy you exactly the damage that you're going to need. I would also offer that Pozic is going to be really good in the matchup. You play this out, a lot of people feel like they have to play those 3/3 mechs, in which case they're not going to be playing overload spells, they're not going to be drawing cards, and they're certainly not going to be setting up lethal if they're spending all of their mana throwing those 3/3 mechs on the board. So just something to keep in mind there. You want to make the turns as awkward as possible for your opponents and just continue to pressure their health total throughout the matchup as much as possible. Against Warlock, I was able to go 3-0 here. It feels like we actually just kind of run over the Warlock deck in a lot of situations. As you know, the different Warlock decks all have the potential for some very, very high rolls, but typically we're going to have a lot of early game. We can potentially just overwhelm our opponents. Keep in mind the different options for removal that these Warlock decks have. I think about specifically something like a Defile. You don't want to set your board up with 1, 2, 3, and 4 health minions. That's going to allow your opponent to be able to play a 2-mana Defile and just clear absolutely everything. You can manipulate the health on the board through a bunch of bananas, and then if they're also going to be playing out minions, you can take some trades specifically to make sure that you don't lose your board to a Defile. Keeping in mind here, if it is Curse Warlock, they're going to be able to do a 4 damage AoE with the Abyssal Wave. And then keeping in mind, after Abyssal Wave is in play, they could potentially play the Lady Darkvein, and then they're going to be able to get off 2 Abyssal Waves as they're able to kill those minions summoned by the Lady Darkvein. So typically, if you can play minions on the board that are going to be a little bit bigger so that they don't die to the first Abyssal Wave, you're going to make it very, very awkward. You're giving your opponent boards that they can't clear, and you're able to just do a lot of damage into your opponent's face. I think I also had some good luck with Blade Master Okani in this matchup. Being able to block a spell, you can prevent your opponent from playing their removal, which is going to be very, very good in the matchup. helping your minions stick around on the board to be able to do more damage face. Against Warrior, I only actually faced one. This was, of course, Odin Warrior. I feel like the matchup is definitely going to be Hunter favored. Odin Warrior is close, but not quite there yet. It's really just not a good deck. Keeping in mind, they are going to have like a Bellowing Flame, so they're going to be able to remove your minions in the early game. When you see them forge a card, that's likely what it's going to be. And I think more recent versions of the Odin Warrior are also going to be running Ignis. They're going to try to craft that custom weapon. Most likely going to be the 5-mana weapon, but could be the 10-mana weapon. If they hit lifesteal, they could have some healing there. But typically, you're just going to be able to keep enough pressure on the board with your minions that you're going to make it very, very awkward for your opponent to be able to play the 8-mana Odin and basically just pass their turn to be able to get that special ability to generate attack off of every armor that they gain. So I would say just develop your board, put as much pressure as possible, and likely that Warrior is actually just going to fold up. General mulligan for the deck, you're always going to want to keep Awakening Tremors. It just gives us some good options in the early game to be able to spend mana. You're going to want to keep the Costume Singer. You can actually just keep Hidden Meaning. The card is good. People will very awkwardly play around it and float mana, or they're actually just going to give you a 3-mana minion on the board early, which is going to be good. I also like to keep Spirit Poacher. I will keep Titan Forge Traps, and I also like to keep Wild Spirits here. Everything else, I think you're actually just going to want to put back and look for some of those aforementioned cards. Grand total here, out of 30 games, 70% win rate. You can see that I actually went 21-9. This deck is extremely, extremely strong. If you're looking to be able to climb the ladder, Hound Hunter, absolutely a tier S deck. I'm Uncorrupt. Thank you for watching.